Hey, welcome to another episode of MLM Renegade. You guys, today we're going to talk about vitamin H. All right, guys, today I sat down, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about. And, sometimes I think it's best, especially in this podcast sort of environment, to talk about what I'm struggling with and the things that I've learned, because really you guys are on this journey with me, right? I have not reached the pinnacle. I am not at the top of my game. I'm still figuring out the game in a lot of ways. And I think that when I'm able to capture what I'm feeling, and it hopefully I'm able to connect with you guys on a similar level, because everybody struggles. Entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes struggle. I've seen it with CEOs of billion-dollar corporations, and I've seen it with a lemonade stand with my kids, and everything in between, literally. And being able to work through that struggle is an important part of the struggle itself, because like I've said before, the obstacle becomes the way, right? The Obstacle is the Way is a fantastic book. Ryan Holiday, if you haven't read it, read it, get it, love it. You will. It's amazing. One of my favorite reads from last year. And but what I learned from it more than anything is that it really is okay to struggle. And it's okay to talk about. We want to be vulnerable. We want to have that real person sort of interaction. I want you guys to meet me on the street one day and feel like you can talk to me like a normal guy, because I am. And so today I wanted to talk about vitamin H, or that's kind of what I call it. Vitamin I at my house is ibuprofen, especially when we're out doing something very strenuous. Definitely got to pop some vitamin I. But vitamin H comes in two varieties. Okay, first variety of vitamin H is hustle. Okay, and the second variety of vitamin H is humility or humble. Okay, and I want to talk about both because they are equally important in becoming the best version of yourself and in this game we call entrepreneurship. So, first of all, vitamin H number one, hustle. Okay, H1 is hustle is so important. When my wife and I first started on this journey together, I hustled a lot. Like a lot. Like I worked my day job from 9 to 5. And then from there, like from 5 to midnight or 1 a.m., I was hustling on the side gig. And it left a lot of things to be desired, to be totally frank. I felt like I was missing out on things with my kids. I was given this, I had this great opportunity, and I was rushing into this timeline that I was trying to make sure I took advantage of at the fullest. And what it did for me was taught me a lot. And I made a lot of mistakes, and I iterated, and I moved on, and I got better. And so one of the things I think that was the biggest was that that hustle, that drives so many of us, but it isn't enough. It's not, that alone won't get us to where we want to go. And so I got to thinking, okay, what is there more than hustle, right? And one of the books I've been reading lately is by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, and it's Extreme Ownership, and then the follow-on to that is The Dichotomy of Leadership. Two books. They're both fantastic. Again, I highly recommend them. I'm not quite done with the Dichotomy of Leadership yet, but I will be this week. And the thing that it talked about in there was that humility. Now, humility doesn't mean sitting quietly like a church mouse and not doing anything. humility is humility is so much more important. In fact, of the two vitamin H's, right, humility is probably the most important. In fact, it's probably one of the most important things that we have in this life in general. Whether you're talking in business, you're talking spiritually, whatever, it is highly, highly important, because you cannot lead somebody if you aren't humble about it. You can't lead them effectively. You can't lead them in a way that they are going to feel like they are valued, that their input is important, and that they are a valued member of the team overall. You also can't lead effectively if others around you don't feel like you're hustling. Okay, they don't feel like you're working as hard. In fact, I had a mentor of mine ask me about my network marketing business, said, if you had 10 people on your team who worked as hard as you did last week, where would your business be? And that's a humbling question to ask, because so many times, and we can get caught up in kind of management mode and helping other people, but not actually doing the work ourselves. And so that can be a problem. And over the life of your business, it can really hamstring you. So that humility, that willingness and that desire to accept input from others, to accept what happens to you, grasp it, take control of it, and utilize it to your advantage is important. But also being humble enough to realize when you're wrong. Okay, nobody likes to be wrong. We don't like to be wrong. Okay, my day job, guess what? I've gotten yelled at a few times for being wrong, and it humbles me. Now, my dad is a very, very wise man and a very spiritual man. And he told me once, when I was going through a particularly rough spiritual patch in my life, he said, JR, God will have a humble people, whether we choose to be humble or whether we are obligated to be humble. He will have a humble people. And that really struck me, and I've tried to apply that in all facets of my life, because in all facets of my life, I need that understanding about how I fit in the world, how I can carve out my niche, but while maintaining the idea of where I am, without giving up the opportunity to better myself and my situation. And I think when we take a humble look at things, the first thing to go when we are humble is our ego. Okay? Our ego really doesn't serve us well at all. Not one little bit. Your ego gets in the way of your own success. Your ego gets in the way of you reaching your highest potential. Because your ego says that you're never wrong. Your ego writes checks that you can't cash. Your ego is your enemy. And humility, vitamin H, is the anti-ego. The anti-ego will attack at the heart of what you're doing wrong and recognize your part in what's going wrong. It'll recognize how you can make things better. And it will recognize where you can take ownership. In reading Extreme Ownership, I've been really impressed with this idea overall of extreme ownership. That in leadership especially, if we don't take ownership for our actions, if we don't take ownership for the things that we're doing good and most especially bad, that we don't have an opportunity to grow as much. And that ego can set in, because the ego does things that are contrary to what's best for us in most cases. You guys, vitamin H can be a hard pill to swallow. Okay? Hustling hard, hustling day and night, working so hard that you fall into bed at night and then get up way too early in the morning to do it again. That can be really difficult. It's really hard. I like to sleep. Let me tell you guys that about me. I love to sleep in. Just love it. My favorite sort of time is when I can go to bed when I want to and wake up when I want to. Guess what? That's part of my why. That's part of what I want to be. Now, here's the thing. Some of my whys are in contradiction with each other. And that's where my humility needs to set in, because maybe it's really best for me to get up at 6 and exercise and spend time on my personal development and do some meditation and spend time thinking about how I can be better in all aspects of my life, in my day job, in my work with my kids at home, in my work with you guys, in running this podcast and working my business. Whatever it is, I need to have that humility to recognize when I'm wrong, and then the hustle to fix it and to move forward. You guys, hustle. Anybody can hustle. Anybody can do that. That is not something that you have to be born with, right? You don't have to be a Vanderbilt or a Rockefeller to have some hustle. You know, I loved Damon John's book, Rise and Grind. You know, I love Damon John. The guy, you know, grew up in Hollis, Queens. He is, and now he's on Shark Tank. You guys probably seen him on there. The guy created a clothing brand from nothing, sold it on the street. Now he's a billionaire, okay? The guy is all about hustle. He has dyslexia. He talks about that. In fact, in the audiobook version of Rise and Grind, he talks about how because he has dyslexia, he's not voicing the book. Because sitting there and reading the book for 6 or 7 or 8 hours or whatever it was would just be like maddeningly painful for him. And that's cool because he recognizes his limitations. He's humble about it. He's willing to step aside from that limelight and let somebody else do the work that they can do better than he could. In the end, that's what humility is about. Letting people with the greatest strengths do what's best for everybody around. And sometimes that's you and sometimes that's somebody else. But we can always hustle. We can always work hard. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I've seen that more than any place in both entrepreneurship and in my sales career. Because I know guys who literally could get by with working half of a regular job. In fact, I worked specifically with one guy, love him to death, and he and I worked very closely together, and he would get more done in a 25-hour work week than most of the rest of the guys that were there got done in 40 to 50 hours a week. And he would spend the other 20, 25 hours a week and do something else. He had his own side gigs. And ultimately got him in trouble because he wasn't humble about it. And he wasn't, he kind of was maybe a little bit too flashy about it. But his hustle, undeniable. Okay, the guy's a stud when it comes to the hustle. And I love him to death. He's one of my good friends. And I think he'd recognize, be able to point out some of his own faults, just like we all can. None of us like to point out our faults. One last thought on humility. There's a scripture that I'm a big fan of. But basically, it says that God gives men weaknesses so that they can be humble, and that when men will humble themselves before him, he will make weak things become strong unto them. Okay? God gives us our weaknesses so that he can foster humility. Remember, God will have a humble people. Okay? Business people need to be humble. Doesn't mean we can't be extra smart, we can't hustle, we can't grind, we can't do incredible work. But when we do it with a spirit of humility, when somebody does something and they're just humble about it and they're not braggadocious and in your face about it, guess what? They get a lot more respect and they are much more enjoyed by their peers and the people around them. And that's huge. I will recognize and I will admit, I'm going to call myself out right now, you guys. I like to toot my own horn from time to time. And that is something that I'm trying to fix in me. I need to be more humble. And I want you guys to hold me accountable to it, because in the end, I know that I will be a better person if I can help others without sounding my own horn in the process. You guys, be humble. Go and hustle your face off. Work today like everything depends on you. And then get on your knees tonight and work and pray like everything depends on him. And you guys, you will be in a far better place. Hey, thanks for listening. And please remember to subscribe. And if you loved us, leave us an awesome review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Now, if you'd like some free training for your team on how your recruiting efforts can be bettered and brought into the 21st century, go to podcast.mlmrenegade.com
and get your copy of the Renegade Recruiting Kickstarter.